Hey all, JTC here, and welcome back to another tier list video. Today we're going to be going over all of Kerillian's weapons and placing them in a tier list, but before we jump into it, I do want to have a little talk about this specific tier list, and give a little disclaimer before we jump in. Now, it's no secret that Kerillian's weapons are by far the most powerful in all of Vermintide. She, is very strong, obviously. Warhammer elves, just in general, are pretty OP, and Fat Shark has decided to keep with that theme in Vermintide. So in order to make this tier list actually look interesting, I'm going to be slightly exaggerating some of these weapons' weaknesses on this tier list. Because, let's be real, if I were to actually do this tier list as it is, it would look like this. And this is pretty boring to look at. So I'm going to be exaggerating some of these weapons, their weaknesses, and I'm going to be putting them a little lower than they usually would be placed, but that's just for the sake of making this look interesting rather than just 3 tiers. But yeah, starting off, I have a kind of a system because these weapons look super similar. Starting off is Sword and Dagger, which I'm going to place right in its own tier. Fat Shark, why does Sword and Dagger exist the way that it does now? It is by far the most overtuned, overpowered, insane weapon in all of Vermintide. It does literally nothing bad. It exceeds at absolutely everything. The weapon has extra attack speed, a higher headshot multiplier, it has extra crit chance on the 3rd and 4th swings, it has a bleed DOT on the dagger hit, and believe it or not, guys, this weapon has inherent block cost reduction. Yes, you heard me right. Just like shields have inherent block cost reduction, so does Sword and Dagger. Why doesn't it have it? I have no earthly idea. Fat Shark, please nerf this weapon. Moving on is Dual Daggers, which we'll put in the AB tier just so we can talk about it, then I'll move it. Dual Daggers are pretty damn good for Kerillian weapons. They actually used to be meta back in the day, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. In the distant year of 2018, these weapons were pretty much like the equivalent of Sword and Dagger now. They did absolutely everything well, and they did nothing poorly, but they've gotten nerfed over the years, and as time has passed, and they're not as good as they used to be. Now, that's not to say that they are still bad weapons. They are very, very good at single target damage and headshot damage. Actually, believe it or not, their headshot damage is so high that they out-damage Shade's extra damage from backstabs. So if you're ever playing Shade with Dual Daggers, go for headshots instead of backstabs. You'll deal more damage. Now, their biggest glaring flaw is that they really struggle with Horde DPS and Horde control. But if you're really smart about the terrain and you use the terrain to your advantage, and you take a weapon that kind of helps you deal with hordes, and you stick with your team, you'll actually be just fine. So I'm going to be putting these Dual Daggers, these weapons, it's pretty much a tie between SA and A, but I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up is Dual Swords. Now, Dual Swords basically have what I like to call a gimmick to them. Their gimmick is that they do really, really, really well against hordes, general hordes, and trash hordes, but they do really, really, really poor damage against armored targets. Their armored target damage and their boss damage is pretty abysmal. Now, if you really think about it, this seems like a good weapon in theory, but with how all of Kerillian's weapons are balanced, most of her weapons do just fine against both hordes and armor. Most weapons don't struggle against either, so Dual Swords becomes more redundant. Especially when, like Sword and Dagger exists, but that's just in its own complete tier. So yeah, the weapon doesn't really serve a purpose in my opinion. It's not that great because you can take almost any other weapon and do just fine. So I'm going to leave it in AB tier. It's not absolutely terrible, but you can do better. Next up, what is that? I believe that's Longbow. Yes, that is Longbow. Next up is Longbow. Longbow is a pretty good weapon, I would say. I would argue that it's only dwarfed by Moonbow because Moonbow is obviously insane, but the killing potential that you have on Longbow is unrivaled to any of Kerillian's because the headshot damage is so high, and it's really her only sniper option that she has. So it's really, really good for picking off specials, and it's really good for picking off elites if you're good at hitting headshots. So yeah, I would personally put it in, I think, A tier. Yeah, I would put it in A tier. It's very, very good. One of Kerillian's best, but not bonkers overpowered. Next up is Hagbane. Hagbane is also a pretty damn good Kerillian weapon. Hagbane does have a lower ammo count, but it does have very good horde clear. It has very good horde like stagger and horde control, and it also does pretty good damage against armored. Now, it doesn't do damage against super armor, but if you chug a strength potion and you start spamming that into like chaos patrols and against chaos warriors, you just completely melt them. So Hagbane is also a very, very good weapon. I would say not quite as good as Longbow in my opinion, because it doesn't have that much of a, it doesn't have a lot of ammo, and its headshot multiplier is a lot less compared to Longbow, and it's not that good at killing off specials, which is why I would personally leave it in the AB tier. Now, next up is Swiftbow. Swiftbow is usually compared a lot to Hagbane because they are the two main horde clear weapons in Vermintide, but just at the end of the day, Swiftbow pales in comparison to Hagbane. A lot of people would tend to disagree with me, and I don't really know why, because Hagbane is just a better bang for your buck. Sure, it has less ammo overall, but the huge problem when you take Swiftbow is like, yeah, it does really, really well against hordes, and it has it has more ammo, so you can kind of snipe with specials, but the problem is its armor damage is abysmal, and it has no way to deal with shields, so shields will hard stop the weapon as well as any kind of armor. Even if you were to just like hit headshots on Storm Vermin, it's going to take like 4 or 5 Swiftbow shots to kill the Storm Vermin with just headshots. And don't even get me started on any of the Chaos boys. So yeah, even if you chug a strength potion, the Swiftbow just pales in comparison to the ability that Hagbane has. And also, you get more bang for your buck with Hagbane than you do Swiftbow. Just 1 or 2 Hagbane shots, and you do a lot more than, holding down the left click with Swiftbow. So Swiftbow is going to go into the BC tier for me, unfortunately. Now, there is one technically good use for Swiftbow, and that's on Shade. We're doing, you can proc Barrage with it by left-clicking a boss rapidly, and then going into Shade, and then stabbing them. But that's really the best you can do with it. Next up, since we just talked about the bows, we're going to actually move to Moonbow. Now, Moonbow is... honestly, I should just put it up here. Everyone knows it's S tier. Moonbow is insane for what it is. Originally, I actually underestimated this weapon. I thought it was going to be much worse than it actually is, but it's actually pretty damn good. The only caveat, the only thing that makes Moonbow not... Actually, I put it in S tier, but I'm going to leave it in S tier. I was considering putting it in SA tier for this one reason. If you are overwhelmed with any kind of like special or elite and you need to rapidly spam Moonbow, you can't do that because you have a hard cap on how many shots you have. Whereas with Longbow, if you're really good at hitting headshots, you can just absolutely just delete like 7 or 8 Storm Vermin with Longbow. With Moonbow, you can't do that. Same thing with specials. If you're playing Twitch mode and you are getting like playing 200% and you get swarmed by Blightstormers, you can just hit like headshot with a Longbow, but you can only do that a couple of times with Moonbow before you run out, and you can't do that anymore. So yeah, that's really the only downside to Moonbow though. Otherwise, it's superior in every single way, and I'm just going to leave it in S tier. Next up is the Elven One-Handed Axe. Now, obviously, this weapon is not great. It's not as good as dual daggers because it does not have as high of a headshot multiplier, and it also doesn't apply a bleed dot, so its damage output isn't as high as dual daggers, and I don't think its attack speed is as high. Don't quote me on that, I don't know. But yeah, just those 2 things alone make it not as good as dual daggers. But I would actually argue that Elven Axe is better than the other axes in the game, Barden's Axe and Saltspire's Axe, only because its first attack is an overhead, and that makes it really, really easy to hit headshots, and that boosts its damage. And just generally, its attack pattern is actually really, really good for headshots. So yeah, it's okay, but it's not necessarily good, which is why I would put it in B tier for Elf. Next up is this weapon, the Greatsword. A lot of people sleep on Greatsword. This weapon, when you put it with Handmaiden and you do like an attack speed, just like power versus build, this thing is a beast. Its main form of horde clear is actually the push attack, because the push attack does a lot more, or I think it does the exact same amount of damage as just left clicking. It doesn't have reduced power or anything, but it's also a lot faster than just left clicking. Now you can offset this on Handmaiden by using like a lot of attack speed, which is usually what I do, and that's what makes the weapon so powerful. But, like, yeah, it has really good stagger, really good horde damage, a fast attack speed if you build it properly, super fast attack speed on the push attack as, like, a good, like, panic button to use, and actually really, really good single target damage if you can hit headshots. This might surprise people. Some people might disagree with this, but bite me, I think this weapon's SA tier. I think people severely sleep over this. Words are hard. People severely sleep over this weapon, and it's actually really, really good. Next up is Elven Spear. Elven Spear is weird to me. It's it's kind of like dual hammers for Barden. I don't like this weapon, but I can't deny that it definitely has its use. It's really, really good for horde clear. It doesn't have fantastic armor damage, but it definitely has better armor damage than dual swords. It's definitely better than dual swords, I'll give it that. But I don't know. To me, this weapon feels mediocre-ish, although it actually does have a really, really good backstab shade build that you can do that allows you to proc Vanish over and over and over again and just delete hordes, which is why, because of that like build alone, I would put it in A tier. It's really, really, really good on that shade build alone. But otherwise, I don't know, I feel personally kind of underwhelmed when I use it, just specifically for the armor damage. Its super armor damage isn't that great, but otherwise it's an okay weapon, I guess. Next up is the Spield, the Spear and Shield. Handmade and only weapon. This weapon's not bad. It's actually interesting because, in my opinion, it's better at single target and armor damage than it is at horde clear. But that's not to say it's bad at horde clear damage at all. It's still pretty okay. But the biggest downside to this shield is that it doesn't have an actual shield bash, so you can't use it as, like, stagger heavy or as offensively as you can the other shields in the game. But, yeah, another big downside to this weapon is that it absolutely destroys your fingers because it's a left-click mashing machine. If you play with this weapon repeatedly, rest in peace your fingers. I will pray to Sigmar for your fingers. But yeah, I'm going to leave it in the AB tier. I think it's fine like that. Yeah. Next up is, what is this weapon called? Oh my god. Repeater Crossbow. I put it in here. Oops. Repeater Crossbow is a very odd weapon because it's only available on Shade, and it's a unique weapon, I'll give it that. I like it, personally. Really, its only sniping capabilities is the right-click, which is actually pretty pinpoint accurate, and the bolts travel fast enough so that you don't have to lead shots that much. So I don't think it's a bad weapon. I think it could use a boost in ammo capacity just a little bit. It was a lot better when you could when Bloodfletcher was able to proc like multiple times and you could just like stab enemies in the back over and over again and just like refill your ammo rapidly. But now that you can't do that, I don't think it's as good as it used to be because it does struggle with ammo a little bit. The left click damage, just the single fire has kind of poor damage, but the right click actually does really, really well. So I'm going to put it in A tier for all of those reasons. I would like to, like I said, I would like to see its ammo capacity buffed, but other than that, it's pretty good. Okay, actually, I'm gonna do this. This is not the Drake Fire Gun. This is actually Javelins, because I know I keep forgetting weapons, but this is my reminder to do Javelins. So the Drake Fire is a stand-in for the Javelins. Wow. Fat Shark, why didn't you make Barden's throwing axes like Javelins? They're just better in every way. More damage, they have a melee attack, I think, off the top of my head, don't quote, I might be wrong on this, but I think you have more access to more Javelins base than you do throwing axes. Don't quote me on that. A better arc, that's huge. Like, I don't know how Barden's throwing axes got just cucked in the throwing arc department, while Javelin's throwing arcs is just so much better. But yeah, really, really good SA tier. Nothing really else to say about it. Next up, second to last, is the one-handed sword. One-handed sword pretty much feels like a lot of the other one-handed swords in the game. Kind of the jack of all trades, good at all, master of none. Although the one-handed sword is actually pretty good. Like, I'm kind of surprised at how good it is. One-handed sword for Kerillian is different in the fact that it actually has pretty good armor damage or single target damage and armor damage compared to the rest of the one-handed swords in Vermintide. Spamming heavy attacks actually does significantly better armor damage than any kind of attack that any of the other one-handed swords can do in the game. I think it has a pretty high headshot multiplier as well, so you can absolutely decimate hordes by hitting headshots. And yeah, I actually really like the weapon. I also think people sleep on it, so I'm not gonna lie, I'm really torn between A and AB. I'm really torn, but I think I'm gonna leave it in AB. Although I think you can absolutely make an argument for it being an A, but I'm gonna leave it in AB. Last but not least is the Glaive. The Glaive is actually pretty good. However, it has one big flaw, and that big flaw is mass amounts of armored units. If you're dealing with a bunch of armored units, you're going to have a pretty bad time with this weapon. I think I was doing Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger Vanguard, and I was on my Twitch stream, I was doing that, and I got someone redeemed a build for me to use Glaive, and I just got my cheeks clapped over and over again. Because when you have that much armor on you, you can't really do anything with Glaive, because you just don't have any, you don't have enough killing power, and you don't have enough, what's what I'm looking for? You don't have enough dodge either. Now, if you hit headshots, you can do plenty, but if you're going up against Chaos Warriors and, just Chaos Warriors, yeah, now that I think about it. If you're going up against just Chaos Warriors, you're going to have a really bad time, but if you're going up against, like, Maulers or Stormvermin, you can definitely you can actually do pretty well with it. So, originally I had this in AB, I'm going to bump it up to A. I just, like, completely second-guessed myself. This thing struggles against super armor. Let me just go ahead and back up from that rambling I did. This thing really struggles against super armor, mass amounts of super armor, but otherwise, if you're skilled enough, you can make it work. It's shield breaking, has good single target damage, has good horde clear. It doesn't have good cleave, so you do kind of have to be careful with that, but otherwise, it's a good weapon. But yeah, that is my tier list for Kerillian's weapons. Yeah, if you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe for more Vermintide content in the future, and hopefully I will see y'all next time. Peace.